Hello, and welcome to another episode of the GK Academies Coaches Panel Discussion. Today's topic is the goalkeeper club academy structures in the United States, and we're going to compare it to those in the UK. And with us today, we have, excuse me one second, I want to make sure I get this up there. We have Coach Mark Duffield. Coach Mark is the head coach at Penn State, New Kensington. He is a goalkeeper coach for locally here with the Pittsburgh Hotspurs in the NPSL. He's a director of goalkeeping at a local club here in Pittsburgh, and he's been a GK Icon goalkeeper coach for 7 years. From representing, or I should say representing our England location, or talking about the UK in today's episode, is Joel Canning. Joel has been a goalkeeper coach for 15 years now. He's been with GK Icon for 5 years. He has 4 centers in Berkhamsted, Aylesbury, Watford, and Mill Hill. He's also worked in professional academies from the Category 1 through the Category 3 levels in both the coaching and recruiting capacities. Boys, welcome. Glad to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you.
Joel, we're going to jump right in. We're going to start with you. In the introduction, I mentioned Category 1 through Category 3 in the professional academy structure. Can you please explain what that is?
Yeah, of course. So in 2012, the English Football Association introduced a player pathway, basically, which formalised the academy structure and made it a little bit more set in stone, because prior to that, clubs kind of had various ways with their academies. They could effectively do what they want. But in 2012, the FA introduced this kind of staging method where you'd have a Category 1, which would be the elite academies, through to Academy Level 2, and so on, going down to Level 3 and Level 4. And all it effectively is kind of categorising how good the academy is at your club. So Category 1 will be the absolute elite. So you've got your Manchester Cities, your Chelseas, your Arsenals in there, and it'll just drip feed down the levels. And what it's really representing is kind of how the academy is structured, what its success rates are like. So how many players are really coming through an academy into a first team setting, for example, what the coaching quality is like, what the facilities are, the welfare of the children within the academies, and really looking at a kind of whole package. And every club, every season, gets a chance to be audited. They have the opportunity to potentially move up these categories. You know, the clubs who are in Category 3, Category 2, the higher they get up the category system, they end up with more funding from the FA and an opportunity to grow and grow. The clubs who are kind of lower down the pyramid, you know, generally are your kind of League 2 and League 1 EFL clubs here in the UK. It's hard, but it's a great system. It makes it very formal. It makes sure that the product is really good quality, and it just ensures that it's a safe environment too.
And when we spoke before, Joel, you were talking that those clubs, there's almost 3 different levels as well within the academy. We spoke to the community, we spoke to the development centers, as well as the club level. Can you just speak to those 3 levels, please?
Yeah, that's right. So before the kind of pathway was put in place in 2012, like I said, clubs had all their own kind of ways of doing things. But since then, it's really been a formalised structure where you'd have almost like a community-based scheme, which would be the lowest level within an academy. You'd then have normally something which is called a skills centre or a development centre, which would be players who are probably just too good for real grassroots football and have potential to be an academy player. Above that, you'd then have, some clubs call it kind of a shadow squad or a phased academy. Every club's got a slightly different methodology, but it's still the same thing. We have an in-between these development centres and the elite academy where players just need fine-tuning. You know, it might be something very, very small and very technical that they need to just improve before they reach the elite academy standard, which is the top tier. So you go kind of a development centre, you go to kind of a shadow squad, and then you go to an elite academy. So it's 3 tiers, and below that you'd have, normally most clubs would have something within their local community where they offer, you know, sessions at a good price, and it's an easy kind of scouting opportunity to feed into that three kind of tiers.
So do they have to get invited to go from one tier to the next? Is there a tryout system, a trialist? How does that work?
Yeah, so generally most clubs will have kind of regional scouts who'll be looking everywhere to fill the development centre, so the lowest level within the academy structure. And for most clubs, it's every quarter, every player will have a development plan, a development journey where they'll sit down with their coach, look at where they are, look at how they're improving, are there areas of concern, and effectively every quarter it gives them an opportunity to really kind of focus on potential developments and can they move up? Is there an opportunity to move up? Or even the players who are at the top level of the academy, are they not quite meeting, the standards that the club sets? And in that case, they sometimes have to drop down the pyramid as well. So it's a fluid system, but because of the regulations that are in place with the FA, it makes it very fair and consistent that every club follows that kind of methodology. And it's very out there. Clubs will have an online kind of base system or a paperwork system that players can really track their performance. So it's very fair.
You mentioned scouting. Can this happen? Can you go scout another academy and recruit players from other academies to bring them into your academy?
No. Effectively, you're looking at the kind of grassroots levels, local football, local teams, and within the academy system, depending on what level you're at, whether you're a Category 1, Category 2, Category 3 academy, you have certain distances that you're allowed to scout in. So the top clubs have got a wider range where they're allowed to scout, so not just in their kind of small area. Whereas going down the pyramid, it gradually gets tighter and tighter where clubs are only allowed to scout within a small region. But effectively, once a player is within an academy, they're a signed player, they're a contracted player, as it were. And, at the end of each season, they could always opt to leave and move on to another academy. But effectively, no, you can't scout a player that's with a club.
Okay. So if you're in that region, is that like your home academy? And so if I live in this center, can I play for the center up here or the academy up here? Do I have to stay within my region?
You'd have to mostly you'd stay within your region. It does differ a little bit. Like I said, the kind of top academies, so your Chelseas, your Arsenals, your Manchester Cities, they've got a slightly wider berth as to where they're allowed to scout. But generally speaking, it's between kind of a 30 and a 50-mile radius of a professional club's home stadium is their kind of remit to scout within.
Interesting. Mark, let's compare it to what we have here in the United States. And you have an interesting dynamic because you're from England. You understand where you came from. You also now understand what happens here in the United States. First, let's break down what the structure is in the United States. Then we'll both, or all three of us, get into kind of comparing back and forth. So, Mark, if you could describe how the academy system works here in the United States, please.
Okay, I mean, like I said, it's a lot different. It's also nice having experience the English system and obviously now coming over to America. What I've seen introduced a lot more now is the MLS clubs have introduced their own academies now. That's only, I mean, Eric, you could probably add to this as well, but as far as I'm aware, the academy system within the professional game has only recently happened, that all the clubs now have their own teams, which for me personally, is a great development for America, having these young kids go through the system and trying to work their way up to the professional game. I believe that most professional clubs do have some sort of regional, you won't get kids from our place maybe going to LA Galaxy, for example. So it does tend to have that regionalized thing as well. Obviously, what we have different here compared to England is the club scene, which is a lot different to how it is in in England. So, for example, I'm from Chichester. I played for, Wick United was a team I played for. Whereas here it can be a lot different. People could live in where I was and then travel very far away to play for a team. And obviously that was a lot different, getting used to that as well, where people would travel so far to play for a team as well.
Let's educate those in England and other parts of the world right now. If you were to describe the club scene here in the United States, how would you do that?
I would say, well, obviously I'll go to the other tiers as well, because we have travel soccer as well, which is community-based, where, if you live in a certain town, you would play for that town, and the costs are a lot more minimal, shall we say. The club scene would be, I would call it like that gap between like a professional team and a club team back home, somewhere in the middle. So you pay a decent amount of money for that over here, but what you get for your money is, in my opinion, really good coaching and really good opportunities. And the thing I like about it, even from like a goalkeeping perspective, you have pathways, you have good goalkeeping training and playing for your club teams. Whereas, and obviously I've been out of England for about 10 years now, so it's obviously probably changed. But when I played, for my town, there was pretty much zero goalkeeping coaching there. I had to wait until I had an opportunity to go to Crawley Town before I had some goalkeeping coaching. So I like over here where kids can get exposed to goalkeeping coaching from a young age.
Yeah, I agree, and that's definitely something that we play a big part in too. Is that neutral goalkeeper training environment where we can come in and work with the club and provide that service that's needed, and it is needed, as I'm sure all three of us will agree. Let's speak to you both mentioned a slight fee structure, just in brief, but let's dive down into the details of that if we can. Joel, what is the fee structure for someone who is playing at all three levels, whether it's the community level, the development center, or at the club level? Is there a difference in the fee structure? If so, what is it? And how is that? What's a typical fee for someone at all three of those levels?
Yeah, 100%. So your normal kind of town club, as Mark explained, your grassroots side, generally it's accessible for anybody and everybody. They're affordable. It's not necessarily level dependent. They're all inclusive. So you'd generally be looking at around £100 a season for a player to join their local kind of grassroots club. Once they go beyond that and they get scouted by a professional side and end up within one of these centres or a pathway, as we've already explained, most clubs would charge for a development centre. The idea being you're paying for an elite standard of coaching to develop the player, to prepare them for proper academy football. They've been highlighted as better than your average player, but they just need that extra professional coaching to move up. And from my experience, you're looking at something around £250 a term. So, that's 3 times a year you'd be paying that. So it's not cheap, but you're going to be getting a much higher level of coaching. And at most professional clubs, they'll be offering, specific goalkeeper training at that level. So most grassroots clubs wouldn't, where you'd be paying your £100 per season roughly. If you're good enough, you'd get scouted for the development centre, you'd be paying that fee, but you would get that real elite training. And most of those coaches in the development centres would then have an opportunity, as we said, to look at your development, quarterly, and can you move up a system. Beyond that, generally professional clubs don't charge. They get enough funding through various sources in the UK where the elite academy players are contracted. The shadow players, the ones who are in between the development centres and the elite programme, there might be a little bit of an in-between where some of them are still paying for a development centre but kind of still training with an elite, so it's an in-between. But the elite academy players, like I said, they're contracted. In some cases, they are actually paid at that point, expenses for travel, expenses for accommodation and things like that. And I even know of some players who get paid a wage, from a teenage kind of perspective and onwards. So you're really looking at a broad range. Entry level, it's kind of accessible to anybody. Once it gets to an academy level, there is a financial implication, and it is a big commitment for families. But if you want to help your player get somewhere, then there's definitely opportunities there.
You mentioned getting paid at the teenage level. Is there any implication, or if that happens, is there any consequence to the future? What I mean by that is, here in the United States, if you get paid at any age, you cannot play, let's say, in college or in the university level. Yeah. You can't. What is the implication, or is there a consequence for that happening in England?
Yeah, there is. So as we mentioned kind of at the start of our conversation, once a player is within an elite academy, so the top level, whether they're a 7-year-old or up to a 15, 16-year-old, they're a contracted player. And at that point, depending on the club, they're some of them are very, very tight with what players can do outside of their contract. They'll, for insurance purposes, they won't be allowed to play recreationally with friends even. The potential for injuries there. PE lessons at school, they'll potentially be banned from. It varies, and from my understanding and from my contacts, it's eased off a little bit in time, whilst clubs have kind of noticed that, the round of greatness of people interacting and trying out new sports and, integrating with their friends at school, it is more benefit to actually banning these children from doing things. And I know from my experience when I was 11 to kind of 14 years old, when I was with a professional club, that I was banned from PE. I wasn't allowed to play for my school team. And looking back at it, I really missed a big chunk of kind of the social side more than anything. So it does seem like clubs are kind of starting to be a bit more flexible with that.
Right. Mark, regarding the United States and the fee structure here, can you please give us details on how that works and the differences that you've just heard from what Joel was saying compared to what we know here in our club situation?
Yeah, no problem. So the travel recreational side of things, I would say maximum probably $60 for a year. I would think that's how much most of their guys would pay, maybe $100 maximum. And like you said, Joel, that's, you know, open to that's ability wise, doesn't matter, anyone can have that, and it's good to obviously play in your community. The next tier would be the club soccer scene. Now that can range from club to club, but if we just say like a ballpark figure, we go with, you know, like $2,000 for the season. On top of that, you have uniform costs, you will have travel costs to go to tournaments. And that's a different structure from here compared to England. We have a lot of tournaments that the teams will travel to. So, you know, I've traveled, obviously living in Pittsburgh, we've traveled up to Baltimore, you know, on the East Coast here. But you're also, it wouldn't be strange for clubs to go to Disney, clubs to go to Arizona across country. So again, that comes with an additional cost as well. The club scene would be more tiered towards the more serious player and someone, you know, looking to try and play at that next level. But within a club structure, you do tend to have different tiers where you could have, you know, sometimes they use like different colors to structure how they define different teams. So let's just say there's a blue and a white team. The blue could be the top team. The white would be the second team.
And Mark, real quickly, you're talking about within a club at a specific age level, correct?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So, within the clubs, they have like their own different tiers of teams. So, you know, and again, it's team by team, base by base, but they tend to use colors. So it could be a blue and a white team, and that's how they kind of identify the top team and the second team. But yeah, so I mean, obviously from my experience of England as well, there's such a difference in cost and accessibility to people as well. But I would say, like to Joel's point, I think over here, they are realizing there's a bit of a cost to it, and there are ways to kind of open the doors to other players as well. If, you know, financially can't get to that point. But I do feel that sometimes some of the fees do take away opportunities for some kids.
I agree with that, and you hear a lot the phrase. You hear the phrase a lot. Pay to play, and you know, and one of the issues that we have here in the United States is that with these high fees, you know, some people can't afford it. You know, they come from a demographic where they don't have the money to join these elite clubs. So as such, what's the scholarship situation? Like, how do you get these elite players to get into the elite programs who can't afford it? And that's difficult compared to Joel, what you were saying, you know, it's free at that elite, not free, you've earned it, right? It's almost like a scholarship. You're contracted, to your point, but you're not paying, and there's a way for people who cannot afford it to get to that elite level. And there's definitely a contrast compared to here in the United States.
Yeah.
I want to speak to the goalkeeper impacts, and I want to dive deep into this one if we can. Let's first talk about from a goalkeeper perspective. I am a child. I'm a goalkeeper. What's the movement like? Because as we all know, we've all experienced this. You're either the starter or you're the number 2 or you're demoted, right? Like that's worldwide. So what's the movement like within the club academy? Joel, let's start with you. Do goalkeepers, do you find them moving to other clubs because of limited opportunities?
Yeah, 100%. Looking at the absolute, you know, grassroots side, your average local club, local goalkeeper, you know, and initially at the young ages, it starts as generally every player gets an opportunity to play in goal, whether they're usually playing out on pitch. If they enjoy being a keeper, it's generally rotated. And from my own experience, what tends to happen is as a keeper becomes more interested, starts loving the position, but clubs maybe still want to tinker, that's when potential frustrations do occur and players look to move on and find opportunities. I think at the grassroots level here in England, there's very limited goalkeeper coaching. Like we said already, that's where we kind of come into play. But the knowledge at the, you know, absolute bottom of our pyramid is very small for goalkeepers. It's very hard to get goalkeepers integrated to their team training. So once, you know, a goalkeeper's identified and they're doing great and they potentially end up in an academy structure, like we said, in a development centre perhaps, that's when probably their first real taste of goalkeeper training would come into play, unless they've maybe visited a company like ourselves.
Joe, real quickly, when you say the grassroots level, can you define that with an age, please?
Yeah, so you're looking at your local club teams, and they generally start from kind of under sevens roughly, so 6-year-olds, up to kind of 15, 16-year-olds.
And there's a limited goalkeeper training opportunities with that category?
You're probably looking at very little, if any at all. You might be lucky enough to find a coach who used to be in goal for his local side, and he might have a little bit of knowledge that way. But these clubs, generally don't have the funding to be able to afford to pay for a coach to go and do their goalkeeper badges or bring a coach from the outside.
So basically, if someone wants goalkeeper training, they're looking at something like a GK Icon to provide that service for them.
Yeah, 100%. There's a few exceptions, obviously, but the funding generally isn't there at that level. So that's where we come into play, unless a player then develops into an academy type level player. But obviously, that's very small and few and far between.
So when they get to that next age bracket or that next after the grassroots level,
Yeah.
What's the age group, and then what's the opportunity to be coached specifically with a goalkeeper coach?
Yeah, so even going up into the development centres, they'd be looking from the age of 6 and 7. There are even 1 or 2 clubs I know of who recruit from the age of 4 or 5, at the absolute elite level, which is incredible. But really for goalkeeping, you're looking at around the age of 8 before they start getting real structured goalkeeper training, once or twice a week with a specific coach, with a specific programme as well. Generally, the keepers who go into, let's just say, a Manchester City or a Chelsea, the age of 6 or 7, they might have little bits of goalkeeper training just to introduce them to that kind of structure and the way we do things. There's generally when you get to the age, which is age group under 9, so an 8-year-old goalkeeper is where it really becomes structured.
And then at that next level, the next age bracket, how often are they training with the goalkeeper coach in addition to the team?
Yeah, so really at the elite academy standard, they'll be training collectively 3 times a week perhaps with their professional club, and you're probably looking at 1 full session with their coach, with their goalkeeper coach. You'll probably then be looking at session 2, maybe half a session with the goalkeeper coach and half with their team. And then if the club has a luxury of having a 3rd session a week, it would just be solely with the team. And I think in the UK especially, sometimes the keepers can be kind of cast adrift and be just handed to a goalkeeper coach, and the integration with their team's not really there. But really over the last few years, and especially since the player pathways come into place, things have snowballed much freer, where the clubs are actually noticing that players need to integrate a little bit more, actually play with their teammates and get to know patterns of play and things like that.
With the goalkeepers then that have to go back and forth from goalkeeper training to team training, 2 questions for you. 1, do you see internal bickering from coaches saying, hey, I need my goalkeeper today, we're going to do this? Or do you find that they're just more like, just go and we'll see you when you return after your training?
Yeah, I think it's a mix. It does depend on the club. I think a lot of them will have good kind of communication through the week and know exactly what the structure is and who's taking who and when. But I do know from my own experience that there are some clubs where it is a case of, right, you take my keepers, I'm not really necessarily that interested in them, give me feedback, but they're yours. Whereas, like I said, there are other clubs that really want to integrate. It'll be a set specific structure as to when and how many minutes here and what the goalkeeper coach's session looks like, integrating into the outfield players' session, and to find a way where they can all merge, really.
Last question for you before I say the same questions to Mark. When that occurs and they go back to the team, do the goalkeeper coaches just train the technical components with a group of goalkeepers, or do they kind of follow the goalkeeper to the team session and then coach from a tactical standpoint in the goal during their training session?
Yeah, 100%. You look for the keeper coach to be there, not dictating play, but managing that player, the goalkeeper, through the outfield session, as it were. And specific things such as support with set plays, supporting communication, especially at a young age, which is particularly hard to get out of a keeper. Having the goalkeeper coach on the sideline supporting the play is great. And I know coaches who are strong enough that will step into an outfield session where their goalkeeper's involved and always try and support kind of defensive lines and that kind of play as well.
Yep. Thank you. Mark, let's go back. Let's go to the same thing. We're a goalkeeper now in the United States. We're at that younger age group. I join a club. What's the goalkeeper training experience like? compared to with their team? How does that all work?
Yeah, so I can justify what I do as well. But what I'll also say is within the recreational side of the game, I don't think there's much goalkeeping coaching going on there. You might get the odd assistant coach might kick a few balls at the goalkeeper, but I don't think there's necessarily defined goalkeeping practice. So then when they get to the cup level, I think both in England as well, everyone's realised how important goalkeepers are now. I know not too long ago there was days when goalkeeping coaching there was no goalie coaching within the professional system, but now every club seems to have one, which is fantastic. So for me personally, I always think when you're at the foundation level, which I would call like U8, the youngest ones, I think everyone should go in goal. Everyone should go. I also take that back. I don't know what you think, Joel and Eric, but I think when a kid starts playing soccer, sometimes they think, "Oh my gosh, I want a ball being kicked at me." Because you see it sometimes, and the coach will go, "Eric, go in goal," and Eric over there, young 7-year-old guy or girl, has never had any goalkeeping training before. You get stuck in there, and the ball might hit him in the face or whatever. Okay, that's one, we've lost the goalkeeper. So for me, when they start joining the structure, is everyone within that phase, the U8 team, they would all get a basic goalkeeping session where you would learn like the basic handling, a little basic dive because everyone loves to dive, and all that basic tools to kind of give you, if you do get an opportunity to go in goal, you're not there just cold feet. You at least have an idea of what's going on, and that'd be like the fundamental side of things. And then you'll build up to the next level, which you could call it maybe like a pre-academy or whatever. Which again, it's not age related. I believe you should train within a structure which benefits all the participants. It's not gender related. It's not age related. It can be ability related. So you'd move up to the pre-academy level, which would be for kids who, oh my gosh, I love the goalkeeping. They're a bit more serious to it. They play a bit more often, and then you can develop it where you obviously learn the basics, what I call the bread and butter of goalkeeping, but you're also teaching stuff like set pieces. I know you mentioned that, Joel, as well. It's unbelievable how many kids aren't taught how to make a wall. Yeah. You see it sometimes, and you see this kid, and they're on the post, and the free kick's in the center of the goal. It's like, where are you standing? Well, what do you expect? The kid's never been taught how to do a wall. You see them in a corner sometimes. They have no idea where to stand. So that's why as a goalkeeping coach, you have to help them out. And what I do, is I'll get in the goal with them during a training session sometimes and try and positionally help them to give them a good foundation, good idea where they need to be.
Mark, real quickly, what age do you start to implement that type of support during a team training session?
Well, and I would say, so let me just think about the years, because I go by years now. Sorry, I'm in the American system. So like what so about 12, 11, 12 maybe. Sometimes, and again, I can't remember what it's like in English. So Joel, maybe you have to kind of update me here. But obviously, we go from small-sided to 11v11, and that's a massive transition. I mean, that could be another episode about that as well, how you transition the goalkeeper from the small-sided game to the other one. So 1 minute the kid goes from a smaller field, and now suddenly they've got to translate into a bigger field. And what I see is a big area to help them is the positional center in that transitional period, because they're used to it. So sometimes they'll sit on their line because they're used to having a smaller field. So our job as a coach is to encourage them. Hey guys, it's a lot bigger now. There's more players on the field. Go and support those players. And that comes from, like I said, 12 years old, where you go and support them in a training session. And that's in addition to the session they would get in the goalkeeping academy. So they would have a goalie session once a week. And then another time during the week, I would go down during their session, give them a little warm up. But I know in advance, I'd say, Coach Eric, what's your session on today? And Eric might say, 1v1s. So my warm up would prep them for a 1v1 situation, a little warm up. How long do I have? 20 minutes, 30 minutes? Get them ready for the session. And then they're ready to go when the other team comes in. But my role in that session is then I'm in the goal with them, coaching them in certain moments. Now, I don't want to be like a FIFA controlling them too much. You got to think and give them those situations. But I will give them a few pointers here and there. And then you translate to the next level, where I think analysis is getting a very important part of the goalkeeping structure. And I'd be very interested for you, Joel, as well, if you use match analysis for your goalkeepers, where you give them feedback on the game. You may have certain team targets that you want them to hit, and then you talk to maybe during the game and then after the game, and give them like a written evaluation. And I know the club that I work at, we have video cameras, so pretty much all the games are filmed, especially for the older group. So I can go back, watch the film, cut it a little bit, then email it to you and say, hey, Joel, can you look at this film for me and try and break it down? Or, we have discussion about it.
I want to jump into, you both mentioned analysis and helping from a team environment, in the goal. What happens when you have 3 teams training at the same time? I know that's commonplace here with 2 fields back to back. Maybe each team gets a half of a field. So you got 4 goals, 4 different. Do you have multiple goalkeeper coaches in each goal? Does each team get assigned a goalkeeper coach, or is it one goalkeeper coach kind of rotating and helping out as they just kind of move throughout the practice? Joel, can I start with you with that?
Yeah, of course. So in reality, the structure that you're mentioning there is commonplace, but that kind of outlook would only entail one goalkeeper coach who would then engulf all of the keepers within an age range. So you might have, 8-year-old to under 12-year-old goalkeepers all together in one place doing a specific session. But we might be able to link that with, like Mark said, to your session that the outfield players are doing, but you generally won't have a keeper coach in all these different places. It'd be one coach designated to a whole academy, given a specific time slot for an age range, throughout their week. But it was a really interesting point that Mark just made about kind of the analysis and the detail going into it now, because really only once you're at an elite academy level here in England, like I said, the top Premier League clubs, and even going down now into the Championship, League 1, League 2, is where you'd find that analysis and the video bits and pieces, the emails. And going back to the points I made originally about the kind of quarterly reviews that players have within academies and the opportunities to move up and down systems, that's where you'd look back on those videos. And that's what I've done in my history, where you look back and go, we need to improve a goalkeeper starting position. We'd find good examples, poor examples, look to see if we can sway that balance somehow. But it's really only at that elite level where you'd get that kind of feedback.
Mark, real quick, I want to hear your answer. Then I want to get back to both you talking about analysis and video analysis in particular. Mark, but I do want to hear, what's the answer that you have in regards to goalkeeper coaches with many teams practicing on 2 fields that happen to be right next to each other?
Yeah, so that'd be me. That's me. That for both teams. My fortunate thing is that we tend to have, you would have the youngest, we call it the foundation phase, which would be, just say like U8 to U10. I'm just going to use that number. U11 maybe as well, sorry. And they tend to be going down on half the field. And the other field, you tend to have 2 older teams. So I would then, I'm fortunate at my club, we have phases. And the phases tend to have a certain topic. So I mentioned 1v1. If there was 2 teams going on and they're in the same phase, they would have the same topic. They'd both be working on 1v1s. So I would work both goalkeepers in a 1v1 warm-up, and then I would go between the sessions working with both the goalkeepers.
Gotcha.
And that's why, and I'm lucky in my situation where our model's like that, where we have phases where they tend to work on the same topic. So it's really good.
All right, guys, we have 4 minutes left, so we're going to speed this up, but I have one question, then conclusion. I want to talk about video analysis. Do you use it? How often do you use it? Meaning match analysis, but also training analysis. Do you use it at the training level? Because a lot of times you'll tell someone something and they're like, no, I'm doing that. But then you show them and it's, oh, wow, I didn't know I was that far off. I believe it's really important. But when do you use it, if you do? And how do you go about using video analysis? Joel, can I start with you?
Yeah, 100%. I think looking at the work we do at GK Icon, I'm relying heavily on parents' interaction and communication with them to get footage for a game day. We're covering 150, 200 goalkeepers a week, so I can't physically go and see them on game day. But when it comes to training sessions, I designate a specific coach at most sessions to go out and film, and I'll give them kind of specific key points and key keepers that I want to keep an eye on, maybe, like I said, their starting position or their W technique, and really look to hone in on that. And it gives you an opportunity to then feed back to the goalkeeper, have a look at these techniques, slow things down and go, can you see, and really get an understanding from the keeper as well. It also gives a good opportunity to then use that footage to explain to a parent or guardian, what we're trying to do and how can that relate to game day. And it's really good way of using the tool, even if it is just using our camera phone just to get that kind of three-way communication going and getting keepers to understand their role come game day and how it relates to our training.
With the training, is it immediate feedback, or do you watch it and then get back to them later?
Yeah, if there's anything that's absolutely obvious that I could step in and see that I maybe didn't catch out my eye but can look back and catch on the camera, I will do. But generally I'll go away, I'll digest it, I'll make some notes, I'll send an email with a little bit of a breakdown just outlining these points, and it's always, you know, really appreciated by the keeper and the parents themselves.
Cool. Mark, same question, video analysis, how do you use it?
Yeah, so I'm obviously very lucky as well, again, because I get to work with this really good coach on a Wednesday when I've had the goalie session. So there's two of us there. So what can happen is if one's running the session, the other one could film, and we can give that automatic straight away, that feedback there and then. Because, like, I mean, Eric, you noted on it, like sometimes with kids, if I say, hey, Eric, you know, that your handling is a bit like this, they'll be like, yeah, whatever. If you have it right in front of them straight away and they see it, they're like, oh, okay, now I get you. One of the big things I've used it for, again, Joel mentioned about the camera phone, is a slow-mo, especially with the kicking. When you teach kids how to kick, just push them through, and they see their foot, and once they realize, okay, my foot's not moving, I get it. But like we use it, and I obviously watch all the games as well because we get to film that as well.
Cool. Less than 2 minutes, Joel. We're going to wrap it up, sir. What points have you learned from Mark, and also what points would you like to emphasize?
Yeah, it's really interesting to see how the two countries and systems, you know, work, and they operate similarly but very differently at the same time. So it is interesting to see the whole kind of structure in both places. The one thing, you know, especially talking to you guys in the lead up to today, was the financial costs of playing soccer in the US, and it is eye-opening. I think here in the UK, it's always been seen football as a kind of a working man's kind of sport and all-inclusive, and clubs will generally go out their way to ensure it is all-inclusive and there'll be opportunities for everyone. So it is really interesting to hear you guys and your points regarding the US.
Yeah, well said. Mark, same question, please. Please wrap it up. What'd you learn from Joel?
Like I said, since I've been out of England for so long, it's nice to kind of catch up and see how the development centres are working. Like I said, where I came from Chichester, I was in between Portsmouth and Brighton, and there was that structure was not there back then. So I'm really glad that there's now that bridge, that gap between grassroots and professional to give kids a lot more chance to get seen.
Awesome. Guys, listen, we're running short on time. I appreciate it. I'm going to cut this right now because I know I'm going to get cut off. Joel, thank you for your participation. Mark, as always, love working with you. Can't wait to see you again sometime. And boys, be good. Everyone else, please tune into our next episode. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you.